There is a new benchmark, and usually, guys, we roll our eyes at benchmarks because it's just become, it's all sort of like the upper echelon. It's like, do you want 20 PhDs in your pockets or 30? I'm like, dude, I don't want any PhDs in my pockets. But there's a new one called Mirror Code, which Jaeden has been texting me about over the last week or something like that, where I'm like, all right, yeah, man, let's get into it. And I think it only kind of came out in the news like in the last few days, but the reason it came up originally was that Jaeden and I were having a separate conversation about it was this whole like screen recording thing that OpenAI, by the way, Claude came out with this like a week ago or whatever, and everybody's blowing up and everybody's like, well, OpenAI had this already, which is that Claude and ChatGPT essentially can watch what you do and can learn from what you do. And I was kind of posting on this on LinkedIn, Jaeden, as you saw, and it just like absolutely exploded. People were so like all into like, what's this going to mean for humanity and everything else? My take is that it won't mean anything for 3 or 4 years because companies are slow to adopt, not because of the technology. But it sort of like fits in with this whole mirror code benchmark, which is that AI is, look, we could, kind of like do entire podcasts on like quote unquote AI is getting better. That's not really the point here. The point is how AI is getting better, and it's becoming almost like it's acting more human. And anytime that starts happening, anytime that kind of like little flag goes up, Jaeden, that's when my antenna goes up and I was like, okay, that's not just about it being smarter. It's about it doing something differently. Can you tell us about mirror code? Because the way you were describing it to me actually sounded really wild.
Yeah, so this is the thing that I think is exciting here in particular is at first, yeah, like you mentioned, I rolled my eyes because I was like, whatever, a new benchmark. And like the benchmark highlight, it was like Claude Opus 4.7 finishes a 2-week coding job in 14 hours for $250. And I'm like, whatever. We all know that these models are good. Why are we even talking about 4.7? These are all my reactions. And like, yeah, it finishes a 2-week. I don't know if you ever get this, but it's like whenever I ask Claude, like, hey, we got to like plan this software, this thing we're building. It's like, okay, here's like the project breakdown. Week 1, we do this. Week 2, we do this. Week 7. And I'm like, okay, do it all right now. And it's like an hour later, it's like done. And I'm like, oh, wow,
Yeah,
8 weeks. Okay, whatever.
So, right.
So anyways, I was rolling my eyes at this initially until I realized what it is. And what was really interesting to me, in this particular study, Claude Opus re-implemented a 61,000 line Apple software program from scratch. It did it in 14 hours for $250. The reason why this is cool is basically there's a new benchmark called Mirror Code, and it tests whether an AI can rebuild real production software. So you're like, go rebuild Microsoft Teams, go rebuild Microsoft Outlook, go rebuild, Adobe, whatever, or go rebuild Firefox. Like you give it an actual software that you want it to rebuild, and it can't get any of the source code. So it basically can probe it, like it can look at it, it can use it, and it has to figure it out from there. It also gets no internet, so it can't do any searches.
Wow.
And it's just such a cool concept for a benchmark. So they had it do 25 target programs. 17 of the 25, it achieved perfect reimplementation in at least one run, and 4 of them hit 99%. Only 8 of them are still unsolved to 100%, meaning like you gave it the software and it was unable to completely replicate the software. Guys, do you understand what this means, first of all? And second of all, I love this because this is the best way to see how good these models actually are. Not just like, I don't know, like, oh, it feels better. It's like, can it literally recreate something that people have spent millions, tens of millions, or hundreds of millions of dollars building? Can it recreate those tools? So I freaking love that. It said that in the study, both OpenAI or Opus 4.7 and OpenAI GPT 5.5 re-implemented GoTree, which is a 16,000 line parser across multiple programming languages. They did it for between $100 and $400 each in a run. In a separate robotics test, Opus 4.7 completed a quadrupled test suite in 9 minutes autonomously, which is about 20 times faster than a 181-minute human record from earlier this year. So this is a benchmark I love, and I think it's very applicable. But I also think it gives us a really good window into what these models are capable of doing, and just comparing it to the past, what we used to be able to do. It's kind of like we get in this tunnel vision, I think, sometimes, where I'm like, yeah, big whoop, like, it came out a week or two ago, and then today I'm like, yeah, whatever, like. It's so common, Claude or ChatGPT, they record my screen and do what I want. It's no big deal. But like, look at where we came from. Look at the past. Look at 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. Like, this is completely different. So it gets me excited all over again. And it also makes me feel better about my vibe coded. I have like, Connor, guilty confession here. I have
Go on.
7 vibe coded, like full on softwares that I've built over the last few months. And most of them I basically just use for myself. And they help speed up like a ton of stuff, like newsletters or all of my podcast scripts or reposting on my podcasts or editing, like anything that I paid for software in the past, I've just kind of rebuilt. I have like 9 of these things. It makes me feel so much better about the software I have because half the time I'm like, I'm not a developer at all, guys. I have no idea what I'm doing. And half the time I'm like, are these just like giant spaghetti code, which they probably are, like pieces of garbage? Well, it turns out they all function. They all do what they're supposed to. No idea if they can scale, but for me, they work great. They all do what they're supposed to. And according to this study, like this is what these AI models are able to do. They're able to recreate full-on software. Now, I'm sure a lot of software developers will be mad about this because they can never be replaced. And I agree, guys. You will never be replaced.
No, for sure.
But you can do 10 times as much stuff. And it is, you're managing systems. You're all seeing how everything's shifting and changing. It's no longer, 10 people. It's now one person running a bunch of projects. But now you can have 10 times as many projects being run, 10 times as many things getting built. I'm super excited about this. And yeah, that's what I'm excited about with this benchmark.
I mean, yeah, it's proof of concept because a lot of times I think, at least maybe sort of in our audience or at least my audience on LinkedIn as well, there's a lot of like, well, that's awesome. But like, am I going to recreate Microsoft Teams or something like that? Not really. Whereas some developers might be like, oh my gosh. But Jaeden, the reason why I always like to kind of like hear what your vibe coding and things like that is that like there's not, you probably do this, to a certain extent for fun, but there's other people who are just thinking, gosh, this doesn't work properly. And we're just so used to the friction of this doesn't work properly. So I guess I'm just going to figure this out. Give you an example, Jaeden, for me. So I have sort of in the last 2 months or so, as you and I have talked about a little bit this summer, like I've gone all in on trying to figure out this agent journey for myself, right? Because like I started really from nothing. It wasn't my skill set. It wasn't really what I was interested in. But then I, when I got my Mac Mini, I got my first open clause, I sort of use those all the time, which we can do a whole episode on. And then in the last like month, I've gone really deep into Claude Code and Claude Cowork and trying to find the real differences and trying to see like what works and what doesn't work. And Jaeden, and this is going to be a whole different pod for us, but I sort of like still stand by the fact that coding and everything else are coding for people like me and also even for people like you. It's 80% just understanding like what do you want, because Claude can get in there and actually do that. And so for me, there was like a whole teleprompter app, and I realized like the friction was I wasn't able to do this easily. And so Claude Code just was like, let me just build you a new teleprompter app that's better than the one that you pay, whatever, $60 a year for. And it's not a big cost or anything like that. But now it's integrated into what I do so it can work better with my own system. And so I didn't set out to sort of say like, oh, guys, I built a new teleprompter. And by the way, teleprompter app is actually very simple. But what it did was it answered, it addressed a friction that I was trying to address. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so like the big problem here was like, could I articulate the problem? And Jaeden, I think that when we're talking about like what this can do, it's really now getting into, we would say like, you can, how like all these advertisements are like, you can just build things like,
yeah.
ChatGPT and Anthropic have versions of that on one side or the other, but it's not until you actually realize like, oh, it can actually just build things, and you have to test it yourself. And I think that that's the big friction for people, which is they're simply not able to articulate the friction in their life because they're so used to it. When PowerPoint doesn't work, they're like, okay, instead of saying, well, I wonder if even Claude, let alone Nano Banana, let alone anything, like can just build this deck for you. And I think it's just like that very natural muscle memory friction that holds us back,
I love that. I have not thought about it that way, but that's like one of the biggest things that I've been doing over the last few months. And that's like taking small or big friction and pain points in software that exist and just fixing it yourself and saying, forget it, I'm not waiting. A really interesting case was I used to have a software that I paid like $100 a month for to book people at my podcast studio. I own a local podcast studio in Arizona. I don't even live in Arizona anymore. I have a manager that runs it, but I used to use it while we recorded this show and my other shows. But anyways, it's still running. But we have like a software there that would book your studio for you. It was $100 a month, and it had so many problems, and it was so annoying for so many different reasons. And I just basically accepted it at the fact when we had it. It was like the login didn't always work. It didn't add things to the calendar properly, so like people could overbook on top of each other. It was just a nightmare, and we're always trying to solve it. And I was just like, I don't know, like that's just life. Then of course comes out Claude, and it's I finally decide to try coding with it, And I realized how easy it was. And I just built a new booking engine for my studio in like in an afternoon or an evening or whatever, like a day. I built it, implemented it, put it live, canceled my contract with them. It wasn't even about the $100, although it was nice to save $100 a month. It was just like, now it works perfectly. Now it integrates perfectly with my calendar. Now I can log in every time. And it's interesting because I'm still like, I get like the newsletter of that like software company or whatever. And I recently saw this big thing where they're like, hey guys, we have like this big announcement, whatever. And they're like, look, we rebuilt the whole thing from the ground up. We added every feature you wanted. It's amazing, blah, blah, blah. And it's interesting because I know for them, they obviously at some point clicked that they didn't have to pay developers $1 million and Claude can do it. And they rebuilt the whole thing from the ground up and added everything. So I'm sure if I ever went back to it, it's probably got way more features and everything.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I'm pretty happy with what I have. I love your example of the teleprompter because I've had nothing but painful, horrible experiences with teleprompters to the point where I don't use teleprompters anymore.
Yeah.
I literally just had to learn how to try to memorize everything I'm trying to say and just freestyle it all because teleprompters were such a pain.
Yeah.
It's such a pain. So that's incredible. But think about the friction points in your life and think about how could I actually solve this rather than waiting around for someone in a different department, waiting around for the IT team, waiting around for someone to go and add a feature. It's interesting. My wife was using something recently and she had an issue and she's like, I'm sending them a customer support request to request that they add this like new feature there. It's like not something that I ever do. And I was like, that is such an interesting workflow, probably really useful because I can ingest that and actually go build it. But I'm like, today, I think what I will do is whatever that customer support request would be, I would just give it to Claude and get it to just spit it out in a few hours. If it was time sensitive, I was like, whatever, I don't want to wait for this. That might still be a good shot. But today, you just do what you used to complain about and have Claude build it for you.
You can just do things. It's like the advertisement says, and it's so stupid because advertisements are just like don't really mean anything, but like this means something. But again, the problem is that it's hard to. And just sort of to close us out, thinking about AI Box and what Jaeden built with AI Box, which is amazing. And just to sort of, plug it for a second here, it's, for like less than $10 a month, you have access to every single model basically. And I think it has like, excuse me, like an MCP connection now. You can, plug it into things, but it's incredible because it's what I used to do all the time, which is how do I compare Claude with Gemini, with ChatGPT, all that sort of stuff. And now the reason I love AI Box is it's simple, it's cheap. But the cool thing, Jaeden, is when you were building AI Box, you and I used to talk about this a lot. Like you were trying to solve a problem that you had and that other people had. And so that's what sort of like, I think got you into this in the beginning. And so this isn't, and again, just as we're closing out the show, this isn't just, well, what's my friction point? It's like, what are other people's friction point? And can you solve that? Because guys, that is money waiting to happen. It's just like, AI Box, tuck off with, all your employees and all that kind of stuff. And that's the thing. It can either be your friction point. Sometimes it's easier to spot other people's friction points. Check out AI Box because you'll sort of see the result of how incredible this is. But just know that this didn't come from the head of some incredible developer. Like this is Jaeden just solving problems. Listen, guys, if you enjoyed this show, we would love it if you leave a rating and review. If you're open to it, we're always so incredibly grateful for that. And otherwise, we will see you on the next episode.